want to start with this new poll that Sky News has commissioned from YouGov. It puts the Conservatives in third place behind reform. That must be a concern.
Well, look, we saw at the last election what a vote for reform has done. It has given Labour a huge majority, which has given them unchecked power, essentially, to take away winter fuel payments from pensioners. It's given them unchecked power to remove support for farmers. And all these things that are happening in the economy are the decisions and choices of a Labour Chancellor. And a vote for reform has enabled that. And so we're confident that as the time goes by to the next election, we can put forward credible, workable, costed policies that the British public will get behind, and we can remove Labour out of office.
I mean, that's a fair argument to make when you were on 24 and they were on 14 or 15. I mean, it's the other way around now. They can be saying a vote for the Conservatives keeps Labour in power because reform on 25, you're trailing them.
Well, polls come and go, as you know, is a long time to the next general election. But we have to be clear that we did lose the trust of the British people. We lost votes to the Labour Party, and yes, we lost votes to reform. It's now the task of our new leader, in Kemi Badenoch, and the team to win back that trust, as I say, by putting forward a credible, professional opposition and an alternative government, along with ideas as to how we will turn this economy around after Rachel Reeves has clearly trashed it.
I mean, it's interesting to see 25 and 22 for reform and the Conservatives. Should you consider a merger?
No, I don't think that's right. I think we, as a party and as a national opposition party, can put forward a credible, professional opposition, as I say, that will win back the trust of the British people. But we have to take our time to do that. We have to have, clear reflection time to put forward to the country by the time of the next election what we stand for and what we want to do with this economy and what we want to do in terms of public services. And I'm confident that our leader in Kemi will do that, and that over time people will come back to us. But I'm in no doubt we lost the trust of the British public, and we have to work to get it back.
Presumably the same time should be afforded the Chancellor to turn the economy around?
Well, let's be clear about this. She inherited the fastest economy in the G7, 2% inflation. Debt was, under control. We had 800 jobs created over the last government. And so it's not true to say that she inherited this terrible situation. She actually made it worse. The budget last autumn, the OBR were very clear. It would be inflationary, it would downgrade growth, it would increase debt, and now we're seeing the reaction of markets to it. Yes, there are global factors driving markets and borrowing costs around the world, but the UK seems to find itself in a particularly exposed position where investors are voting with their feet, and she needs to urgently get a grip of this and make sure that she can calm nerves. I understand she's coming to the House today under the guise of an update on her visit to China, but let's be clear what this is about. This is about her having to come out to calm markets, calm nerves, because it's clearly very troubling out there.
I mean, I must say I find it tedious when the government continues to talk about the economic inheritance when we're now 7 or 8 months into their time. I think it's even more rich to come here and suggest the economic inheritance was strong. I mean, yes, the economy was the fastest in the G7 based on the prior 2 quarters. For the first time in probably your entire time in office, it was not the fastest growing in the G7, in fact, lagged pretty extensively the US throughout the entire 14 years. So it's an interesting framing. And on the tax burden, it was the highest since World War II. And on the debt level, which you said was under control, was the highest on record, ticking up to 122% of GDP. So I just have to push back on this. Do you accept, all factors considered, that the economic inheritance was not good?
It was a lot better than it is today, but I've always been clear on this show and many others that we had a really tough time with a global pandemic and the war in Ukraine, which pushed up wholesale gas prices, which meant that we had to step in. Of course, we had to step in with additional support for families and businesses. That pushed up debt, yes, and then we had to pay that down, and that meant raising some taxes. Of course it did. But we were on a trajectory which was improving. Inflation was back down to 2%. It's now going up under this Chancellor. Growth was projected to be significantly better than it is projected to be under this Labour government, and we did half the deficit since 2010, since we came in. So I'm not going to pretend that it was all perfect? Of course it wasn't. We went through a really difficult time in the economy, but we were turning it around. We were projected to be growing faster than we are now under this Labour government. And I just feel that it's wrong for Labour to suggest that it was all so dire. And of course, we find ourselves in this position with investor confidence so low because they came into office talking down our economy, talking down our country. And so, no surprise, investors have walked away. And then they go and surprise investors with a massive tax increase that they didn't expect. So it's no surprise the situation we're in. She's got to urgently get a grip of this.
I think the main point, though, of what they've announced is a spending increase, and that takes time, not just to arrive in the first place, but to have an effect on the economy. And, in that sense, we haven't necessarily seen the positive effects of the budget yet. To touch on China, do you ultimately welcome and expect the UK to have a long-standing economic partnership with China?
I don't think anybody can deny that we have to have a relationship, I think, with the second largest economy in the world. China is an undeniable power in the world, and it would be wrong for a G7 economy to not engage. But we have to do so with our eyes open. And Rachel Reeves will come to the House today, and she needs to explain how, yes, we can capture the opportunity of a fast-growing economy, but that we do so while also protecting our intellectual property, that we protect our supply chains, and that we are very careful in how we deal with China, because clearly they don't play by the same rules as some of our other partners in the world, and certainly our allies in Europe play by different rules to China. And so it's about getting that balance right. But obviously they're the second largest economy in the world, and so we do need to engage with them.
Dan Jarvis, the Security Minister, was on earlier talking about new measures to be discussed around cybercrime and pushing back on those that make ransomware attacks. He implied pretty clearly during the conversation that NHS trusts had not just been hacked in the past, but maybe even paid up ransoms to prevent private patients' data being released over the last couple of years. It came as a surprise to me, I guess, not to you. Were you aware of that in government?
I'm afraid I'm not able to comment on those specific remarks by the Security Minister. It's not something I was involved in government or have any knowledge of. But clearly there is a threat out there, a state threat, in terms of cyber attack is real. And we put in place a number of measures in government to protect state offices and also public services. And I think it's right that we did that.
And I mean, I guess the consultation period now, but the step the government's looking to take is to make it illegal to pay ransoms, both for private and public institutions. Is that something you think the Conservatives will support?
Look, we will look very carefully at what they're proposing. I've not been briefed on this particular situation, and I'll be able to look at the detail in due course.
Gareth Davies, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you, as always.